For the last 20 years or so, Rosie and I worked in advertising agencies up to and including the very most senior level, C-suite, etc., in London, Sydney, and in New York. And then we decided to start a new kind of company based on what we believed. That's why we called it Genius Steals. It's based on what we believe about creativity, about ideas. That is, ideas are new combinations. Nothing can come from nothing. One cannot invent without inventory, and therefore originality is a myth. By working with clients like Coca-Cola, agencies of all disciplines and across all geographies, and media companies, we have, let's face it, an unusually broad purview of the creative industrial marketing complex, and we delight in arbitraging knowledge from pockets to other pockets as we go.
So this all brings us back to this idea of the lone genius, because we hear the word collaboration coming up again and again. It's increasing in importance, and it looks a little bit different with our remote working. And yet still, as much as we push collaboration, it seems like we are always encouraging, incentivizing, and calling out individuals. So we're going to talk about collaboration, what Scenius is, as opposed to genius. So Scenius then is this communal form of genius, the genius that erupts from communities.
And if you've ever been to an art gallery that puts people like Picasso in context of their time period, you'll see that Cubism wasn't his basically idea. It was an idea bubbling up in the art culture that he was part of.
What we like to say is, no one is smarter than everyone.
And we stole that from Steve Jobs. Well, at least we stole that most recently from Steve Jobs.
And he himself is also shameless about stealing.
So as the world gets more complex, we need to keep learning, right? We all need to be lifelong learners. That's now mandatory simply because the rate of change in the world around us is so rapid, and the tools we all use to work and collaborate are changing all the time, like this platform we're using right now, probably brand new, right? This is just going to keep happening. It was Zoom last year, and now we have other things developing on the back of that. So it's not enough for it to be a lifelong learner. We need lifelong learning organizationally, right? We need a culture of shared learning where we have a rapid exchange of tools and techniques so that we all get faster at the same speed as our fastest learners. That way, the entire organization gets smarter, and that means we all can be it, which is good. It's a good place to start because you're actually at a conference and possibly part of a consortium of shared learning among academia and business, which is probably a brilliant sweet spot, we believe, frankly. But it's important to share your knowledge and experience, right? And be willing to have others' experience and knowledge shared with you, which is also important. We want to understand what other people do, at least enough that we know when best to use them and work with them and where their job ends and ours begins. And ultimately, ideally, there should be a budget earmarked to enable us to all get better and smarter organizationally.
Two final conditions for collaboration is tolerance for weirdness. This is my favorite because I guess if you see our hair and our personalities, we definitely embrace the weird. Weird, wacky, wonderful. Look, these experiences create dopamine releases in our brain. They help with discovery. They help with processing, with creating memories. But they also help with collaboration because we are going to frequently encounter people who don't necessarily think like us. So how we can increase our tolerance for weirdness? Well, first thing is minimize hierarchy, because when we have senior leaders in the room, we're often afraid to share our silly ideas. We want to be, our ego comes into play a little bit more. So you could have the senior leadership stand outside the room for a brainstorm, or maybe even have them commit to an improv game of yes. And then lastly, create a culture that celebrates differences. Give people the opportunity to come to the table as they are and be willing to celebrate that rather than calling that out. But also, we would challenge you to include a little what we call outspiration, which is just inspiration from further away sources. So what might you do if you had to use inspiration from a modern art gallery trip? What might be different if you look at a competitor from a totally different category, right? If you're in the perfume business, what are cars doing? That's totally different, and vice versa. Don't limit yourself to just looking at people nearby.